Okay, I'm back. There's conversation being had.
Cool. I'm bringing everybody back. Welcome back, everyone. We still got people calling in DR.
Never enough.
Welcome. I heard there were great conversations happening, and I would love to hear. So in the chat as well. So those who went back to being age 5 through 9, what was it like to think about that time? Do you have any thoughts about the external or internal assets you did have, or how many? Feel free to come off mute or raise your hand, or to drop in the chat, room 1 and 4.
Well, I'll go. Our group talked mainly about the impact of external activities in terms of play, and also belonging to groups and activities. Most of us had those experiences either by we voluntarily wanted to take part, or our parents thought it would be good for us. And some of them, obviously, like playing piano, it's like my mom forced me to play piano, sort of thing. But I think in terms of that is that, most of us felt that those activities actually were positive for us. You had good role models, you had, interactions with kids your own age. You learned a lot. I mean, I was talking about the fact I was in Girl Scouts from the time I was a little girl.
Yeah.
Went all the way through to senior scout. And it actually made a huge difference, I think, too. Like you had to go out and sell cookies. So I won a cookie badge one season or something like that.
Yeah.
So I learned selling skills at a very young age, how to force people to buy cookies. But anyway, but yeah, I think most of us kind of felt that way, is that those external activities, whether you volunteered or not, for it, that, your parents generally wanted a positive thing. But sports, I think, was something separate. One of the participants was talking about how, you see parents on the sidelines screaming, and it's more about them than it is about the kids. And so that can be a negative thing as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Especially at that age, you're not going out and signing yourself up for soccer. Your parent, it may be up to, your parents or, whoever's in charge of you to get you that exposure. And what's their ability to do that? That's going to vary family to family. So yeah, thank you for sharing. So room 2 and 5, ages 8 through 12, that kind of what we call now tween years. What was your experience going through the assets and thinking back to that time? Drop in the chat, raise your hand, come off mute. We would love to hear it. All right, y'all. I'm telling you, you'll get more out of it if we share. But I know y'all understand the group. So, room 3, the teenage years, the tough times. This is where a lot of things change, because where teens are at developmentally, they relate with their external relationships very differently, and it's difficult for them. It's very hard to communicate, just developmentally speaking, when you are a teenager. So, and you also have more power, more influence over how you spend your time. Yeah, Donnie.
No, I'm sorry. I was raising my hand for room 2 from age 8 to 12.
Please.
And I
Yeah,
guess,
please.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Okay. For our group, we had a little contrast. One participant was from a large family and had a lot of support from the siblings or older siblings. The other one was from where he was the only child. And that it was they didn't have the same sibling support, but they had the family love and they could get the resources. But we found out there was still a lot of independence going on at that time. Even though one was a latchkey kid, the other one had family support, or people were around, but the doors weren't locked, so it was someone around at the time. So yeah, it was a nice contrast to hear the difference, but was still very similar experiences.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, is that these assets will look different, right? Depending on what your home life or family looks like, or what your community looks like. And what the programs in one community will look different than the same type of program in another community. So things will look different. And you can have family support, whether your family is very small or whether you have tons and tons of siblings. It can look different. So yeah, no, that's a great observation. Awesome. Cool. All right. We're going to move on. You'll be catching up with your group again in a little bit. So don't worry, it won't be the last time you see your new friends.
I'm sorry, you didn't, was group 6 the same as group 3?
Groups, yes, group 3, but we're going to move on.
Okay, cool.
Just for time. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the reality is that where young people do most of their growing is in relationships and not programs. And I say that not to disparage the wonderful programs who are present here today or to you all, but rather to show the value of the you and the people who work at your program. No, it's not when we get a youth a tutor, it's not just that they have access to tutoring, it's who their tutor is, right? And who that youth is interacting with. And when you think back to these times, you're not only going to be thinking about the program that you're in, but you're going to be thinking about who worked there, and who you saw every day, and what somebody said and made an impact on you. So we just want to, again, bring the focus back to relationships, because that's also the area where we actually have influence, right? We might not be able to necessarily add, right? Some are in our control, some are not. We might not be able to influence external assets necessarily, but we do have the power. If the relationship takes 2 people, you have the power of influence on your role in that relationship. So when we're thinking about our kids, we want to be thinking about the relationships they have, not only with our program, but the people at our program. So again, linking these 2 things together, those external assets, which again, we may not have influence over, but we know that kids need a lot of these, the more the better in their lives: support, empowerment, boundaries and expectations, constructive use of time. And again, those developmental relationships, which we're getting more into, but relationships in general. These are things that we can do to help kids thrive. We can express care, challenge their growth, provide support, share power, expand their possibilities and their minds. And again, adding those things together, we're helping to build those internal assets that you all just reviewed, and other kind of the social emotional stuff. So again, there's so much talk about SEL and social emotional learning right now. And how do we do it? Is through those relationships. That's where the area of which we have influence, and we need to do that intentionally. So let's get into developmental relationships. What are they? Why do they matter? Well, definitely not. How can your organization support developmental relationships if you have influence, if you're a program leader? And then what can you do individually to build developmental relationships? Because again, everybody has a role in some relationship, and we can be intentional about that. This is on pages, there's more expanded information on pages 9 and 10 in your takeaway packet. Some great thoughts going on in the chat. So again, the relationship are that actor ingredient. The effectiveness of child-serving programs, practices, and policies is determined first and foremost by whether they strengthen or weaken developmental relationships. So again, our aim is, of course, to strengthen. So what are they? Simply put, developmental relationships are close connections through which young people discover who they are and gain abilities to shape their own lives, learn how to interact with and contribute to the world around them. So that's kind of the broad idea of developmental relationships. We will get into the specifics. So again, what are those elements that make a relationship a developmental relationship? So again, these are actions that we can take in those developmental relationships. And I drew some arrows here, but I realized everything should be pointing at everything else. These are all connected. Every relationship has and should have all 5 of these elements, maybe different amounts depending on the people in relationships and the needs of the people in the relationships. but everything should have these elements, which are to express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, and expand possibilities. And we'll talk more about what those mean. So from the perspective, this is all written from the perspective of the child, but again, that's not to say that relationships go one way. Relationships by nature are bi-directional, and it will go two ways, but we're going to talk about the perspective of the youth in your program, or or the mentee. So we're going to be talking from the perspective of the young people. Express care. Show me that I matter to you. It's very simple. We want to make kids feel mattered. They do matter, but do they feel it? And how do we show that to them? Provide support. Help me complete tasks and achieve goals. We know our kids need support in that ways, and I know a lot of your programs are out there providing support. Challenge growth. Push me to keep getting better. Again, we talked about having high expectations. This is that challenging. We know you can do better. Let's do it. Sharing power. Treat me with respect and give me a say. And we'll get more into sharing power, but often this is something, one of the harder ones, especially in the olden days when kids were to be seen, not heard. Sharing power is new for some people and can be difficult and greatly varies by age group, but we'll talk more about that. And then expanding possibilities. Connect me with people and places that broaden my world. So again, this kind of came up a lot in assets, right? About exposure to different cultures, different people, different places, different ideas, different things to do. Expanding possibilities is really important. So we're going to get deeper into each one. So we can talk about, again, the how we do it. So again, expressing care, be present, pay attention when you're with me, right? Putting our phones away for a little bit. And again, these apply to all relationships. So you may be thinking, oh, I want my husband to do this for me, or a friend, and things like that. But again, we're going to be talking about as it relates to children. So be present, pay attention when you're with me, be warm. Let me know that you like being with me and express positive feelings for me. Yeah, sometimes we just need to put things into words and let someone know. Invest, commit time and energy to doing things for and with me. So for those of you who are in mentoring programs, you know that you're asking your mentor to make a commitment of time and energy, right? And to co-invest with you in that child. Show interest, make it a priority to understand who I am and what I care about. And this is often why I say people who work with youth need to think back and kind of process their own youth experience. So that again, they're able to be open and accept the information of, meeting this new person, this new child, and getting to know them. And be dependable. Be someone I can count on and trust. So what I'm going to ask you, and again, feel free to come off mute in the chat. Think back again. You can think about your whole childhood now, not necessarily age specific. So when you think about express care and, these kind of actions, who did this for you when you were a kid? And how did they do it? Let's kind of talk about through some examples so we can see some of our practical how, and how also it shows up differently, for each of us. So who expressed care for you? Who was present? Who was warm? Who invested in you? And how did they do it? What actions were they taking to show you?
I had a great aunt who was just a hilarious person, and she thought I was funny and really encouraged me in that way and would take the time to be with me. And then she would talk to my grandma about how much she liked me. So it was always nice to hear that also. And she was a very snappy person. So that a snappy person would say something nice about me felt very good.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And right, talking with other people, again, just about affirming, that I really like this person and care about them. That's wonderful. And again, when I say who, it could be a family member, it could be outside your family, it could be a parent. I've done many types of people and many people, growing up, moms and dads. So it could be a lot of people who did things for you. Hopefully, more than one person. But yeah, any other examples?
Hi, this is Shaniqua. How are you guys?
Hi.
I was just talking about this to my daughter yesterday, who's 12. We've had similar traumas in our lives. And I was expressing to her that the blessing in my traumas came because I had so many wonderful family members and teachers that I'm friends with 30 years later who have really influenced my life and kept me from crashing. It was like really important that my grandmother, that school teachers in high school, they really helped in my development and kept me sane before I could meet psychologists and other people to help, you know? So yeah, those team members, I call them, have been influential, and it's important for all children to have that consistency of people that show love and show differences from the trauma that they're growing up in.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing. And there's some great ideas in the chat as well. You bring up such a great point, is that while we know that having those relationships is important, it's not to say that because I have a mentor or because somebody cares about me, it means nothing bad will ever happen to me, right? Or that I will avoid all trauma. Those external, not external assets, or external deficits, that trauma that's not something we necessarily have influence over. But where we can disrupt and build that resilience, those internal assets, so a child may get to the other side of that trauma and thrive, that's where relationship is. And that is, that's the work that we can do and the power of that. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Such a great point. Love it. So challenge growth. Inspire, help me see future possibilities for myself. Expect, make it clear that you want me to live up to my potential. Stretch, recognize my thoughts and abilities while also pushing me to strengthen them. And limit, hold me accountable for appropriate boundaries and rules. So again, who did this for you and how did they do it? You know, whenever I'm talking about the developmental relationship framework and, my experiences, I always say that I had a lot of people challenging me growing up. And when I think about all the elements of the framework, the most people I can think about the category is always challenge growth. And why it was because I needed it, right? There may have been some gaps in the other elements, but I needed to be challenged, or, things weren't going to happen and I wasn't going to reach for potential. So at the time, while maybe I found that more annoying and frustrating to constantly be challenged, I appreciate it now. But again, we have to think about having the balance of all these things, that we're not just challenging, that we're also expressing care and things like that. So again, I want to post for you, who did this for you and how did they do it? Who insisted that you continually try to improve? And how did they do that for you when you were a kid?
In my undergrad, and in high school, I had two people, but I guess I'll talk in youth because that's what we're talking. But in high school, I had a teacher who, and I'm Khalid, by the way, with Keys and Powers. I had a teacher that we were in our school, it was like a college prep school, so we were able to call them by their first names, which was weird. But my English teacher, Lucy, she pushed me so much, and we had this a segment in class where we would free write, and so we would come in and we would take our books out for 10 minutes. We would just free write, and if you couldn't think of anything, you just write stuck until your mind just kind of free wrote, right? And so she would push me all the time. So one day I free wrote like 3 pages about how much I cannot stand her because of how she pushes me. And so she would periodically go through our journals and she would say, I push you because I know that you have more to give. I'm a writer now, literally, like I'm a writer now. And I think that was what it was. And, she pushed me. And to this day, I remember her just, she just would push me and she would give me like low grades and I'm like, what? And then she would let me fix it. And then I'd fix it and she'd give me a higher grade. So I appreciate her for that, because now I'm, editing books and writing books and stuff like that.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And you make such a great point there, in that, right, there was challenging, right? But when she went through your journal and saw those things she wrote about you, then she didn't bring the hammer down, right? She made space for it. And it did some of that caring and support that we talked about. So you could do that growing. So yeah, again, it's never just about, you know, one element, but it's about both. So Danny's in the chat, most of these practices I didn't experience till late high school or undergrad, but it was not too late. Absolutely agree. So it is never too late for a child to be building these relationships, but to start doing this work with the children in your life, to the adults in your life who might need some positive relationships. It is not too late. And if you had the power and the influence to be there for somebody and do these things for them in your role in their relationship, I hope that you will do it. Thank you so much. Cool. Provide support. So encourage, praise my efforts and achievements, guide me, provide practical assistance and feedback to help me learn, model, be an example I can learn from and admire, advocate, stand up for me when I need it. So help me complete tasks and achieve goals. So again, who did this for you and how did they do it? How did they provide support for you?
Okay, so I don't know. I have a really good friend. She's 12 years older than me. And so when I was younger, she was like a big sister to me. And, you know, my life wasn't super rough, but wasn't, you know, always great. And so there were times where she stood up for me, and my mom is pretty bold and boisterous. And so there were times where she would stand up for me to my mom, because my mom was super duper hard on me. I was the second born, but I guess because I was the girl, my older brother's the boy, you know, that whole saying thing. But you know, she was really, really hard on me. And so, you know, my friend, she would you know, she would like help me with like practical things and just kind of help me learn from it that eventually it's going to make me stronger. And to this day, she still says, you're almost there. And I'm like, you've been saying that for like 4 decades, like I'm almost there. But I understand now that I really am almost there. I'm arriving. You know, you never fully arrive because it's part of life, but I can see what she's saying now.
Totally. Yes. Thank you for sharing again. Such lots of great points there that I want to point out. And so the research said that support is best when it's warm and friendly and fun, or it doesn't take over. And then also when it focuses on putting in the effort and not just finishing, right? So we know anybody who's done any sort of kind of teaching and things like that, that it's not always, it's about the learning process. Especially in things like science and things like that, right? It's about trying to find a solution, not necessarily always getting to the right, you did, blah, 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 blah. But a lot of the learning happens in that process, and to be in that process, that there has to be effort. And that's where a lot of this encouragement and support can really be of value for our kids. Yeah, Lauren, talk about teachers and coaches. Yes, yeah, this kind of encouragement and what encouragement works for different youth, it will look different, which we'll talk more about as well. Awesome. Okay. So now a tricky one. Sharing power. Hear my voice and let me share in making decisions. So respect, take me seriously and treat me fairly. And often it is hard to take kids seriously. I think we've talked about concepts of adultism and other mentor DC training, and this is something that, and this is an element where adultism shows up a lot. Like, are we able to take youth seriously and treat them as such and treat them fairly? Giving voice, you know, any programs working with the YPQA and things like that, know all about youth voice. We're talking about asking for and listening to my opinions and consider them when you make decisions. So not just hearing them, but like, are you seriously considering them? Are you taking it seriously? Respond, understand and adjust to my needs, interests, and abilities. We had a youth panel last week at our DC event, and a youth who really spoke to this about how their mentor would be like, well, what do you want to do? And they felt very empowered as a result to think about, like, to take seriously their interests and the like, and that was really powerful. Collaborate, work with me to accomplish goals and solve problems. So while, you know, sometimes when we are collaborating with youth, things take longer and move slower, but it's about committing to do that, that youth are, you know, are truly empowered. they're able to make decisions. So again, this is going to look differently for each age group because, you know, if we're asking a 4-year-old, you know, what they want to eat for dinner, then they want to eat candy and the like, which is what I would have said, you know, that might not be an area where it makes sense to share power. And by age, you know, as you've aged and age, there's more opportunities to share power with them. But again, I want to pose to you, who did this for you? How did they do it? For me, I'll give an example because again, I find this to be more difficult for people, but you know, I had a mentor in high school, not an official, like assigned to me mentor, but kind of a natural mentor who showed up for me. And we, you know, we're planning events for, you know, kids my age and the like. And he included me in the planning process and in the preparation process and the setup and things like that. And really, well, I was a very privileged child. I was very disempowered and just assumed that, you know, kids can't do anything. And like literally that like kids can't do stuff and that we don't have the power to it. And this person included me and listened to me and gave me a voice and all of that. And it, you know, it literally like totally changed my life. And this person is, you know, is still my friend today. Ooh, let's say 20 years later. Well, like, let's say 15 years later. So yeah, who shared power with you when you were young and how did they do it? So Lauren makes the point, adults can fall short. They might believe they already have the answer. Yes. Again, especially when we're feeling busy and trying to save time and the like. It's an extra effort to include youth and to slow down and let them be a part of the collaboration and the process. This is something that takes the most intentionality, I think, as programs, but also in relationships as well. Thank you for sharing.
I think too, depending on, a lot of times it's the community or the culture that you grew up in, because a lot of these things really are, you know, just pretty much dedicated to the adult. It's like, do as I say, not as I do, and the generation that you grow up in. So I know that I don't have anything specific for me in any of those age ranges actually, but if I can, I was a director for an after school program. And because, and it was about 120 kids, and because I knew how important the children's voices were or are, it was one little boy in particular who always got in trouble, always got in trouble. And so because he always got in trouble with you know, with a quotation mark, the girls used to pick on him. He was a cute little curly hair, so the girls used to bother him. And so they came in and they told me that, you know, Miss Khalid, he's bothering us. And so he came in my office like, oh, yes, Miss Khalid. And I said, so tell me what happened. And he looked at me like, what? And so I said, tell me what happened. And so he told me what happened and they were bothering him. So when I called them in to, you know, to kind of rectify it, they were bothering him. And so I said to him, when you have a problem, what are you supposed to do? So he said, call you or one of the adults or one of the facilitators. And I said, okay, thank you. You can go now. And he looked at me like, what? I can go now? Like, are you serious? And I said, go ahead. And so he left, and you know, the girls got consequences because it's not fair, I guess the word fair, but really for us not to hear them, because he always hears that he's wrong. And so his behavior, he was still who he was, very rambunctious, but there was still a shift in his narrative for himself. And so when he came to aftercare, there was a very different behavior than it was in regular class, because I provided him the voice and I gave him a way to kind of work through the stuff that he knows he's going to have to work through anyway. And so, you know, and the girls got to see that when you come down here, you can't do that. That's not going to happen. So
yeah, I worked at an after school program as well, and you're right, there would be, you know, teachers and school staff who were in disbelief about how differently a child acted after school, and that was because, you know, we literally applied this exact framework. So yeah, great example, Callie. And then again, this is something when a common like little trick, right? There's your, you know, a troublesome kid in your class, and what do? Give them a job, right? Give them some responsibility.
Renee,
share their power. Yeah.
Can I make an observation about something she said that I was already thinking about?
Yeah, please.
As far as sharing powers go, I was thinking about it, running a mentor program and also being a school teacher, to share the power effectively, the adult has to already have the basis of providing support, challenging growth, expressing care. I think those three have to come first in order to share power well and effectively. And in her story, she did that. And that's something as a mentor program, I need to start teaching my adults to do those first, and then you can share power.
Yeah, because because a lot of times, I'm sorry, because I'm just kind of going on with Joshua, because a lot of times with my team that I had, I would, number one, in our professional developments, let them know that that children are already feeling voiceless, so we have to give them a voice. Right. And number two, and well, with the younger ones, they always ask to go to the bathroom. So on a developmental level, I tell them, they could ask like 15 billion times to go to the bathroom. You cannot tell them not to go to the bathroom, because the only thing that a powerless person or a powerless child or a voiceless child has is control of their bladder and their bowels. Yep. And so if you tell them no, that 15 billionth time that you tell them no, and they may have an accident on themselves, the parents are not going to look at all the other times that they asked. They're going to look at the one time where they had the accident. And so you always have to give them, of course, within reason. And then also just, letting them know that, encouraging them. I always tell them, if they say, I need to go to Miss Khalid's office, don't tell them no, because there may be something that they're not comfortable sharing. But we have to provide a space where the children don't have to come to Miss Khalid, that they can come to you. And I found that it really helped my team understand that some children are just doing things because they just don't realize that it's about something that they feel like they're missing. Yeah. So always that piece, was super important for me.
Yeah, thank you. And Joshua, you make a great point, right? These elements, they build on each other, right? The easiest thing, not to say that expressing care is easy, but it can be as simple as making eye contact, giving a hug, showing up, calling a kid by their name, and things like that. Some of those actions are a little bit easier and quicker to take, but the elements build. And again, it's not just about one element, right? You can't just share power. Like it's impossible to do without those other things. So again, it is about the balance between them and implementing all of them per the situation, per the child, per the people in the relationship. Awesome. So then our last element, expanding possibilities, expand my horizons, and typo. All right, expand my horizons and connect me to opportunities. Explore, expose me to new ideas, experiences, and places. Connect, introduce me to people who can help me grow. Navigate, help me work through barriers that could stop me from achieving my goals. So I want to actually keep moving. So I'll give a personal example. So for me, my dad was all about taking us to cultural locations. When we moved to Maryland, at the time, there was a science center. There was, before Port Discovery, there was some other children's thing, the aquarium. Like, we're always going to places like that and doing that learning. And I got to see, outside of what my experiences were in school and where we lived, but to see other places and learn new things, which was amazing and valuable. And, besides doing this individually and individual relationships, I know that, your program, you think about exposure a lot, especially for kids who are not likely to get out of their communities regularly. So, as far as programmatically, we're thinking about field trips and, bringing in different people for youth to connect with. Those are kind of the programmatic ways that you can think about expanding possibilities. But on the individual level, what assets do you have to leverage for your mentee, the youth in the program, to help them expand their possibilities? So we're going to move us forward. So again, I can give you some time in breakouts, and we will be likely breaking out into the same amount of groups. But if you can turn in your packet to page 11, 12, and 13, you are going to see, excuse me, on each of these pages, there's a scenario. For those of us in youth programs, it will sound very familiar. You've probably encountered that scenario. It's not, in that way, it's not a challenge. But what I'm going to ask you to do in your groups is to describe an action or a potential solution that falls under each element. So approaching scenario 2, how can I express care to to help better the situation? How could I challenge growth, provide support, share power, expand possibilities? These don't, every solution should just relate to the element. They don't necessarily have to build on each other. And we do this because one, this is building your toolbox. So when you're in a scenario, you can think of at least 5 different ways of how you can solve the problem, react, etc. And B, the same with those tools is that every child needs something different, right? I would always say that because I was being challenged all the time, at home and elsewhere, that for me, I would have responded more likely to expressing care in some of the areas where I was lacking. So it's not to say that, every solution is going to work every time, but by practicing this and applying this framework, it gives you at least 5 different things to try and different kind of lenses to think about how am I approaching this situation with my mentee, with the youth in my program, and how can I, determine what they need in this situation. So room 1 and 4, you'll do scenario 1, which is on page 11. Room 2 and 5, you'll do scenario 2, which is on page 12. And then room 3 and 6, you'll do scenario 3, which is on page 13. And we will break out now for 10 minutes. And let me open those groups again and stop my share real quick. All right, see y'all soon. Welcome back, everyone. I'm actually gonna keep us looking into their faces for a little bit. So we are almost towards the end of our time, but I would love if someone from any group can come off mute, review their scenario and the actions that they would take as applied to the framework.
I can share. My name is Kayla. So I was we did scenario 1. So one of the things, our scenario was about a mentee who was hesitant to try new activities. And so one of the things that we highlighted, a couple of things with expressing care, just being really direct in terms of like showing that you enjoy being around them. And I think one of the things that came up was being in the same vicinity with them and just that proximity and being able to show it, that you enjoy being with them and directly sharing that you enjoy that. Some of the other things include challenging growth or providing support. So for example, using your own personal stories, maybe including humor when you talk about certain challenges you may have experienced, because sharing that kind of vulnerability could be helpful, right? Let me give one more. So expanding possibilities. We had a really great example, such as maybe mentee and mentor together talk about different activities that you've done in the past, right? And so what things have you done that are maybe similar to these new activities that might feel a little bit more challenging? And how can they kind of relate, and how do they possibly relate to one another? So you can see, so that they can see, hey, maybe I do have some skills or some things that kind of relate to this. And so those are some of the things that we discussed. We had a pretty good discussion, I think. So that's just a couple.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are great examples. And I, would love to hear just more generally, and you can just write in the chat, how was it going through that process? Did it make sense? Did you realize that maybe you are already doing some of these things? And it's really about applying the lens and just being that little less bit intentional. So again, these scenarios, everybody has access to all the scenarios. They are in your packet. I'll say that these scenarios and this framework generally make, a great practice for, fellow mentors, your staff, something to work through and brainstorm around. And again, all these things are a practice, right? No, not everybody's showing up, as the perfect mentor or the perfect youth development professional every day. But when we keep these things in mind and have that lens, things might go a little bit better. So I want to keep moving. I want to share a little 5-minute video with you all, but we are getting towards the end. So why developmental relationships? why developmental relationships? I hope that, that you are convinced, but this last bit is to encourage you to, again, to take this work, apply this work as it means, to the context of you. So let me share this little video from Search Institute and let me know if you can't hear, but it should work.
We just have to help every single person out, because at the end of the day, every person counts, and you just got to show them. We just have to help every single person out, because at the end of the day, every person counts, and you just got to show them that there is hope.
What we have noticed is one of the missing factors in the wider community is that healthy web of adult relationships surrounding every child.
We have found that there's a certain group of kids that are just like relationship magnets. They've got like 5 or more developmental relationships with adults in their lives. And then most kids fall somewhere below that, but then in sample after sample, we find about 1 in 5 kids really tell us with a lot of clarity that I don't have anyone in my life who regularly expresses care, challenges growth, provides support, shares power, and expand possibility. And when we think about that, we think about how important these relationships are to kids' development. That gap, what we might call the relationship gap with that 1 in 5 kids who are saying, I don't have it, should give us all a lot of pause.
They are less likely to perform at their highest level when they don't believe that they have someone who cares for them, who understands them. So City Year is really starting to fill in those gaps.
For a lot of my students, they face instability within their relationships with adults every single day. They deal with heartbreak, they deal with disappointment from adults. It's really crucial that when they come into a school building, they have that unwavering love, sometimes stern, high expectations, and that balance of friendship, but also that kind of, we're friends, but I also have to set these expectations for you. And our core members do that every single day.
Developmental relationships are key to a healthy, functioning society and democracy. Society depends upon the collaboration of folks in neighborhoods working together to solve community problems. That can't happen without the presence of developmental relationships.
Relationships in kids' lives are like roots. They're like the roots of a tree. If the roots are strong, then those kids can grow, they can thrive in really powerful ways. And the roots are influenced by the soil in which they're growing and the air in which they're growing. If that soil is rich, then the roots are gonna be stronger, then the growth is gonna be better.
The ability to intentionally help young people develop strong relationships with adults and their peers is singularly important to the way that we do our work.
I don't think you should ever force a relationship, but I think having City Year intentionally work and build those relationships with the kids, I think definitely has made a change. I think the City Year and the students' relationship has definitely grown. And I think because they are having better, more intentional relationships with the students, I think our students are gonna be more successful because of that.
Absolutely. When we talk about the multiple dimensions of relationships, it's care, it's challenging growth, it's expanding possibilities, it's sharing power, that we see our young people empowered. We see them be able to address conflict more effectively. They feel more confident in their ability to discuss things that are challenging to them, that are hurting them, that don't feel right to them.
I'd say it's helped me connect with students in a way that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. You know, I like to connect with all my students anyway, but this program gave me a structure where I had to really ask them questions I might not have asked otherwise. Like, how do you feel about your relationships with your peers or with me as your teacher? It also forced me to be honest with myself about how I was doing building relationships and how I was fostering relationships between students.
He kind of connected with the students more than any other teacher, I'd say. He cares about what we think, he cares about our opinions. He makes sure that we understand what we're learning.
When I first entered the classroom, I looked at it, I said, it's gonna be a good class. I know I already know my expectations. He's gonna ask me for work and stuff, When I first met Mr. Turner is an awesome teacher, introduced himself, and that's the kind of teacher I want to get ready to go to school for.
Ms. Brown really did help me with the 5 steps for the developmental relationships. It's because I developed a relationship with her and she developed one with me. We have a good relationship where we respect one another along with anyone else outside of CAS. That really shapes us who we are as students and as we go on through our life.
Yes, so I hope you were able to, well, I know that you heard a lot of things that had connections to what we've talked about today. And I love that video because it really hits every point that I would want to make at the conclusion of this training. We heard that teacher staff member talking about the internal assets that are being built, that kids are able to share more, have better conflict resolution and the like. And that there is a relationship gap, which we hear Mental Malady talk about the mentor gap. It's a relationship gap in that there shouldn't just be one, ideally one developmental relationship in a child's life, but as many as possible. A web, the more the better. The more assets, the better. The more developmental relationships, the better. And I think a lot about from my experience as a kid and hearing from that teacher, particularly in high school, if I felt that a teacher did not care about me, or if they did not challenge me or support me, I would perform worse in their class. The classes that I performed the best in were where I liked the teacher and I knew the teacher liked me, and it went both ways. So, and then because I was starved for that relationship, and without it, I was salty about him and therefore not do as well in the class. So again, there's a lot at stake when we talk about whether these relationships are present in a child's life. So here, again, all these slides are going to be sent out to you here. Search Institute's done tons and tons of interviews and, straight from the youth's mouth about why these relationships are so important to them. We don't have too much time for questions. We're going to ask Giard for my email in the chat if you want to connect and talk more about this. As far as your takeaway, which please let us know if you weren't able to download this, we'll send it out again. But the last half of this takeaway is a little bit more in depth about the framework and about the elements as it applies to working with groups. So that for those of you who work with more than one child, which I assume is a lot of you, there'll be some really good information in there. And then what's coming up here at Mentor Maryland, DC. So this is our first training of the fall schedule. Next up, we have our Mentoring Best Practices Institute about monitoring and support. It might sound boring, but we are providing this training as it's the time of year, new mentors are being brought into programs. Oh, thanks, Blair. Got it. More mentors are being brought into programs, and now we need to support them throughout the year. And this was an area that programs like you identified in surveys that we want to keep training on. So that is coming up. In November, we have the Baltimore Citywide Youth Development Forum for our friends in Baltimore. Signups are not open yet. You will hear from us soon, but that will be a totally free event. It's going to be so awesome. So look forward to hearing about that soon. And then in December, our last training for the fall is going to be combating white saviorism. So for my white colleagues here and white mentors, this will be of particular importance and interest. It's a wonderful training produced by another mentor affiliate that we did earlier this year in Montgomery County, but now it's going to be open across Maryland, DC. So we really hope you will join us. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate the work that you put in your breakout rooms. I hope you made some connections, and I hope that I will see you again soon. Again, we're going to send out a PDF of these slides. We'll send out the takeaway again, and then we will also be sending out a survey, so you can just let us know how this training went, what you'd like to see in another training. If you want to see more about this topic, please let us know, because we're here for you, and we want to provide meaningful resources and support to you all. So thank you guys for coming. It's 12 o'clock, we're right on time. Enjoy lunch and have a great week. See you soon.